Hey, it's Denise from LoomHat.com, and on this video I want to show you how to make a scarf. I'm going to show you how to make a scarf that is customizable. It fits whoever it is that you want. So I'm going to show you how to figure out how many pegs you need for the width that you want. So I'm going to show you how to figure out how many pegs you need. I'm going to show you how many rows you need so that you get the length that you want. I'll show you how to get these really nice edges so that your scarf looks nice and neat, not only on the sides but also on the ends. As you can see, it is possible to get really nice edges on both your ending side and your beginning side. This has no loose loops, and it's nice and square, and both ends are the same size, and that's not always common on loom knitting, but it is possible, and I'm going to show you how. And before this ends, I'll show you how to add fringes. So let's get started. You can use any loom you have, whether it's a round loom or a long loom. You need your hook, you need a crochet hook, and if you don't have one, do get one, because in loom knitting you will use crochet hooks for several types of projects. So it's a good idea to have one. And if you don't, then get your yarn needle. And of course, your yarn. You're going to need a whole skein of yarn. I would say about 300 yards and about 150 grams of yarn. Alright, let's start. Okay, so I'm going to be using this 31 peg large gauge loom, and gauge is this, is determined by the space between one peg and the other one. This is about approximately an inch. You don't have to use this loom. You can use a long loom, and that's okay. The pattern's going to work the same. You're just using only one rack. These are 2 racks, and we're not doing a double knitting. We're doing single knitting, and we're only going to use one rack. So this pattern is going to work whether you have only a long loom, or you only have a round loom, or you have a very small one or a big one. It doesn't matter. This is how you're going to gauge it. For every 3 pegs that you have, that's going to count approximately. So please don't throw any rocks if it doesn't turn out exactly the same, but approximately for every 3 pegs that's on your loom that you knit, you're going to get an inch of width on your scarf. Okay, so for every 3, it's an inch. Alright, so that's how you're going to determine how many pegs on your loom you're going to use. Alright, so let's get started. I'm going to be knitting with 2 strands of yarn as one, and I'm going to do this because of the type of stitch that I'm going to use and because of this large gauge loom. So this is a number 4 medium worsted weight yarn. If you have a heavier yarn like a 5 or a 6, you don't need to use 2 strands. You can just use 1. Alright, we're going to start by doing a slip knot. You don't have to do this. You can just wrap your yarn around that first peg. This is the anchor peg, but if you can, you're going to wrap your index finger and create an X. Put your thumb on that X, take the loop off your index finger, and take that working yarn, push it through that loop, and then you're going to create a new one, a new loop. Pull on the string, and that creates a slip knot. It's called a slip knot because, of course, it slips, right? Alright, you're going to take that slip knot and you're going to put it on your anchor peg if you have one. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. Just put it on the peg next to it. Alright? And then we're going to start wrapping every peg because we're going to do what's called an eWrap cast on. So take that working yarn and bring it behind your peg and wrap your peg. Alright? And then just keep doing that for the number of pegs you've determined that you need for your scarf. In my case, I am doing 19 pegs because my scarf is going to be 6.5 inches. So 6 times 3 is 18. And, the wider your scarf, well, you're going to see that you have like an extra bit going of width. And that's why I'm only doing 1 extra peg. that's going to give me, those 19 pegs are going to give me more or less that 6.5 width that I'm looking for. Now this is my cast on, and I've added the yarn now to my loom, and I'm ready to do that first row. So what you're going to see me do here, I'm only going to do for this first row, okay? So keep that in mind. So we're going to take this working yarn and we're going to bring it in front of this last peg here. Alright, on this cast on row, we are wrapping this end peg. And that's going to be different from all the other rows that we're going to do. Okay, so remember, first row, we're wrapping this end and we're coming over to the peg next to it, that neighbor, and we're going to come from behind it and we're wrapping it. Okay, and as you can see, we're going now from, well, I'm going now from left to right, so that I can end up back at that first peg that I wrapped. So I'm wrapping back to front, right? And you see that I'm pushing those loops that were already on my pegs, I'm pushing them down because I need separation between the bottom loops and the top. So I keep wrapping, and now I'm back at the front. This was that first peg that we wrapped. And I'm going to bring that yarn and I'm going to bring it forward, and I'm going to hold on to it with my thumb, and I'm going to take my hook and bring that bottom set of loops up. Okay? And I'm going to come back to this next one. I'm going to pull on it a little just to make this one a little tighter. And normally with loom knitting, what happens is that your ends are pretty loose and your middles are kind of tight. So try to tighten the ends. Okay, this was your first row and you did that. Now I'm going to show you something. You're going to come here. Normally you would keep knitting, but this is your first row and I just want to tighten it up a little bit. So I'm stopping here midway and I'm coming to the end. Alright? And I'm going to come here and I'm going to wrap this end one, and it's going to do that really funky thing right here where everybody freaks out and wonders what happened. You know, it creates like a funny loose loop. Alright, so we did that. Don't worry about it. You're going to take this one next to it and you're going to tighten it. See? You're going to do like this, and immediately you see that that end one is getting tighter, right, as you're tightening this one. So bring it over and come back to this next one and pull on it, and that's going to tighten this one. And what happens is as you're coming around, the other ones are not as tight and you don't have as much extra yarn as you did before. Okay? And so because your end ones are always looser than your middle, this first row, we're just going to help the yarn out a little bit. Okay? As you can see that by the time you get to the middle, it's not that tight anymore, right? I mean, it's not that loose anymore. It's doing much better. Now you don't have that bulky thing going on over here in the end, and you don't have a bulky thing going here on the other end. Now that was your cast on, and you're still going to have to fix it a little bit, but you won't have to fix it as much. And in some people's cases, depending on how it works out, they're not even going to fix it at all. But that solves what in many cases on loom knitting gives you that very, very loose first row. And because we're doing what's called eWrap, where you're wrapping every peg and knitting, then you're going to estimate that for every 4 rows from now on, you're going to get an inch of length. Okay, so now we're talking length. So we're going to come back now and we're turning around because this is a flat panel. This is not a tube. We're not going around. We're going in one direction, turning around and going in the next direction. So now we're turning around and we're going towards the right, and we're going to skip that first peg. And we're going to do that every time we turn around from now on because we want nice clean edges. And you get nice clean edges by skipping this first peg. And I know it sounds weird. Let's not even try to get to the science of it. Just know that it's true. You know, it's like some of Grandma's recipes. They don't make sense. But I'm sure that they would if somebody would study it. But, you know, why? Why study it? Just, you know, just do it. Just skip that first peg and you're going to get a nice clean edge. And now we're wrapping again. We're going to wrap each peg, okay, all the way down to the end, to that very last one. I'm going to wrap that one as well. And you know, as always, you hold on to that working yarn with your thumb and take your hook, and you're going to knit that first one that last one that you wrapped is the first one that you knit, and that secures your yarn. You don't want this to unravel because you're not going to be happy if it does. Okay, now from this point on, every time you do this, you take that next one and you pull on it a little bit, all right, just to tighten this a bit. Don't overdo it because that's not good either. These edges have a tendency to curl, and if you make this too tight, they're going to curl even more. So just pull on it just a little bit and do that for the next, you know, few. I would say maybe, you know, maybe the third one. And after that, don't keep pulling on it really hard. Now just knit normally, okay? You're just going to knit off like you normally knit off. All right, so now you're getting here. You're back at the front, okay? And when you did wrap this edge, you came from here and you were heading towards the right. Well, now you're going to turn around because now your working yarn is on this end. It's on the other end. So what are you going to do? You're wrapping going in the opposite direction. Now you're going towards the left, right? So you're going to take your working yarn, and again, you're going to wrap your pegs starting with the second one. You're going to ignore that first peg. You're not going to wrap it because you want nice clean edges, okay? I mean, unless you're like, you like sloppy stuff, then, you know, go ahead and wrap that last one. It looks not so good. So I would suggest to skip it, which is called slipping. Okay, you slip that peg, that stitch. All right, so now wrap your pegs back up again, and some people push them down ahead of time. I push my loops down as I go, and everybody has their own way of doing things. And I'm, you know, in a awkward position because I'm knitting from behind a camera, so everything looks just funky the way I do it, but it's normally not like this. If I'm sitting down and knitting, well, you know, it looks different because I'm sitting with the loom on my lap instead of on a table. All right, so I've wrapped every peg again, and now I'm ready to knit off. And as always, my working yarn is secured by my thumb until I do that first knit off. Then I can let it go and it's not going anywhere. And then I start with my next peg and I pull on it just a little, just enough to tighten up that edge, and I start to knit off again. All right, now I'm on my second row. I did a cast on, I did a regular row, and this is my second row. Okay, and I'm knitting off. And you see how quick this goes? I mean, this can go really fast. Once you get a hang of it, you could just, you know, listen to music, watch TV, whatever. You don't even have to think about it. That's what's so awesome about loom knitting, is that you don't have to focus. And in my case, where I have a mild case of, you know, ADD, and I don't focus even if I wanted to, this is good because I don't have to think. I know where I left off. I'm here on the other end, right? And I'm on my, now going to work towards my third row. And what I do in this case is that I don't need this anymore. This anchor peg here doesn't need to hold my yarn anymore. My yarn is secure now by the knots that were created by my knitting. And now I'm ready to take off. So I feel really good that you guys understood what needs to be done. You need to skip that first peg, and you're going to wrap all your pegs, and then you're going to knit off. And you're going to keep doing that. And you're going to do that 4 times for every inch that you want. So, you know, just think that if you're thinking about the scarf in feet, then remember that there's 12 inches to every foot. So, you know, do the math. And in fact, if you hang tight with me. I'm going to give you the formula so that you know how to figure out how many rows you need for your scarf, because your scarf may not be the same length as my scarf, right? I might want one that's 4 feet tall. You might want one that's 6 feet, long. Depending on who is your recipient, right? That's how long you're going to make your scarf. So I want to show you how to make scarves for everybody, not just one person. Okay, so again, I'm going to keep knitting, and so are you, until we get the length that we want. So here's the formula. So I finished knitting the number of rows that I needed for the length that I wanted my scarf to be. And just keep in mind that we're knitting approximately 48 rows for every foot. Now at this point, if you look at your edge here, your beginning row, you'll see that it's rolling. And for some people this is okay. I don't want it like this, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. It does have a little rolling effect on the inside as well. For some people, worse than others. That's why I tell you to, to try to work a little loose here. Try not to be so tight so that it doesn't roll. And so at this point, we're ready to bind off. We're ready to finish off this edge here, right? The other end. And we're going to use a technique called a basic bind off. And I do it with a bit of a modification. Okay, so let's start with where we began. This is our peg number 1. And for the basic bind off, you're always working with 2 pegs. Okay, and what you do is that you take the peg next to the one with the working yarn. Here's your working yarn. Here's the one next to it. You wrap that peg that is next to peg number 1. So we're going to call this 1. We're going to call this 2. And you knit off that second peg, and you take the loop off the peg and you put it on peg number 1. Tighten your yarn a little bit and then knit off. And then you take that loop and you take it off that peg and you put it on the empty peg and tighten up a little, right? And now that peg is empty. And so that's what you're going to continue to do to the end. But in my particular case, what happens with this bind off is it tends to give you one end that is smaller, less wide, right, than the one that you started with, and I don't like that. So I also want it to be square. So what I do here is that instead of coming here to my second one, which is what the basic bind off tells you to do, I'm going to wrap them both. So I wrap peg number 1 and I wrap peg number 2 and I knit off. Now I did that when I went to work on my second one, right? I wrapped both, I knit off, and now I'm taking my loop off of peg number 2 just like I did before. I'm putting it on peg number 1. I'm going to tighten up. I'm going to knit off. I'm going to take the loop off peg number 1 and put it on peg number 2. Now I have 2 empty pegs. Now you saw that I did something extra here, right? Now I'm going to continue to do what you need to do with a basic bind off, is that here's my working yarn. This is peg number 1. Here's peg number 2. I'm going to wrap peg number 2. I'm going to knit off. I'm going to take the loop off of peg number 2 and put it on peg number 1. Tighten up my yarn, knit off, and take the loop off peg number 1 and put it on the empty one here. Okay? Again, I know this can be a little confusing. I'm going to come here and I'm going to wrap peg number 2. My working yarn is here on peg number 1. I'm going to wrap peg number 2, knit off, take the loop off 2, put it on 1, tighten, and knit off. Now I'm going to continue to do that, but like I told you, if I do that completely around, I'm going to end up with one end of my scarf being smaller than the other. And so when I get to this middle right here, I'm going to modify this basic bind off by knitting both, wrapping both pegs instead of one. And I'm going to do the same thing right here when I get to this peg, which is the third to last. And the only reason I'm going to do that is because I want to add width to this basic bind off, because this basic bind off shrinks the width of your end, and I don't like that, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen that, but a lot of loom knit scarves, they're bigger on one end than the other, and that shouldn't be. That just doesn't look right. Okay, so this resolves that problem. So as you can see, I continue to do this basic bind off, which again, you wrap your second peg, knit off, take the loop off of 2, put it on 1, knit off, put 1 on 2. It's your basic bind off, and you guys can remember this for other projects, but here we are. Okay, almost getting to the middle. And I'm just wanting you guys to hang tight with me, because I want to show you again what I'm going to do, right? I want to show you what I'm going to do when I get to that middle of this scarf. How I change, how I modify the basic bind off. And here I am. So instead of doing what I would normally do, which is to wrap this peg number 2, I'm going to wrap them both. Now I'm doing it a little before than I should, only because of time, because I want to hurry up and show you what I'm doing. This is modified. This is not your basic bind off. I did something different. I wrapped both pegs instead of peg number 2. That's the only thing that I'm doing different, and I'm only going to do that a few, 3 times here. I'm dividing my project into 3, and in those spots, instead of only wrapping peg number 2, I am going to wrap peg number 1 and peg number 2. Hopefully that it doesn't confuse you too much. If it does, then just do the basic bind off and don't worry about modifying it. Alright, I will have the written instructions on the website, so, look in the description for that link. So keep going, and like I said, I'm going to do that extra wrap again right here on the third to last. So just keep doing your basic bind off, and let's meet there again. Okay, so I'm here, and I'm going to wrap both pegs. See how we're almost at the end? I only have these 3 pegs to go. So the end is near. Or sort of. The end of, knitting the scarf, but then we still have to add the fringes. So as you can see, what I did was I wrapped both pegs, and then I took the loop off of 2, I put it on 1, knit off of 1, and move the loop over here. So now I'm on the end. This is my last 2. I'm going to wrap this last peg, knit off, and then take this loop, bring it over here to 2, tighten it up, and knit off. Right? And then I'm going to take this off the peg, this loop, and ta-da! Now your work is free from the loom. Okay, so your knitting is free from the loom. I took it off, and now you have this one here, this extra loop. So you're going to cut the yarn and take that extra loop and feed it through. Take your working yarn and feed it through that loop. And this is much easier with a crochet hook. Okay, but for those of you that don't have one, that's it. See? That's your end. Okay, and you're done. And now what you're going to do with this is that you're going to take the crochet hook or whatever you have, and you're going to feed this through here. Okay, so if you have a crochet hook, get it, and let's weave these in. Now, I prefer to use a crochet hook to weave in my ends, but know that you can just use the needle, a yarn needle that comes with your set, and you're going to do basically the same thing, so either one is fine. The way you weave in your end is, first of all, make sure that this is secure, right? It's nice and knotted and it's not going to come loose. And then you're going to come here in between these ends, and you're going to bring it in through there, okay? Just try to follow that same pattern down so that it's basically hidden, like you can't even tell that it's there. Okay, and you're just going to continue to weave in that end. Now some people will feed it through these sections right here, and that's fine. Whatever you find that works best for you, then do that. Your intent is just to hide this yarn. In this case, I was knitting with 2 strands as one, so I'm going to take and separate one of them like that and make a knot, and I'm going to cut it. Okay, make sure that I don't make this too tight. I'm going to make that knot right there, and I'm going to cut it, and then I'm just going to hide it like this. So I'm not going on forever and ever and ever, right? And that's it. It's gone. That's how you weave in the ends. Alright, now let's work on the other end of your knitting. See? Basic bind off looks really good. Let's go to the other end. Okay, so now we're here on the other end where your work has curled up, and you want to get rid of that. So here's the working yarn that you had. Take the knot out, and you're going to see that it's been fed through your work. Just kind of, figure out where it's at and pull it. Okay, and there's your working yarn, and what you're going to do is you're going to go to the other end. Okay, working yarn is on this end. You're going to the other end, and you're going to start with the first yarn, like right here. See, it's right there. And you're going to go find where that's pulling from. And I can see that it's pulling from there, right? So I'm going to pull it and then pull the one next to it. And you see how that starts to pull? Okay? And then I see when I pull this that it's right here. I'm going to pull that to tighten this front yarn by pulling the one behind it. And then this one tells me which one's the next one. The next one's right here. And I'm going to pull that in order to straighten that one. I pull this one, and it tells me this is where it's at. So I pull that one. And see, when you pull, it tells you what's the next yarn you need to pull on. And as you can see already, that has lost its curve. It's not curving anymore. It's not rolling. Okay? It's already straightening out. You have that one rolling, and this one isn't. Because when you take out all that extra loose yarn, those loose loops, it doesn't roll anymore. Now it never goes completely away, but gets very close to that. Gets very close to it not rolling almost at all. Alright, so keep going. Keep working on those loose loops. And if you need to look at it in a different way, in the description, I'm going to give you a link to a video that is just about loose loops. Nothing else. Okay? Keep working, and we'll meet on the other end. Okay, so I'm here on the end. I have pulled, and you see how much yarn I have and how this no longer rolls. And my edge looks really clean. So I'm here on my end, and here's the last of it that I'm pulling right at the end. It's the last of these loose loops. And then all I'm going to do is, here on the end, this was my initial working yarn. This is where the slip knot was. I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other end. Here's the last of the last loose loops, and here's my working yarn. I'm going to feed it through there so I can create a knot and secure that end. Okay, and now I'm done, and I want to show you that both ends are identical. Okay, they're the same width, and neither one of them curls. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to add the fringes to your scarf. And that's pretty simple. I don't like to have mine too thick or too long, so this is how I'm making mine. And I use the same little tag that came with my yarn. And basically what I do is I take the one strand and I wrap twice. Okay, so now there's two in the back, two in the front, and I get my scissors and I cut it, and this is going to give me 2 strands, right? But remember that you're doubling here, so you're actually going to end up with 4 out of these 2. So think about that when you're cutting it. Like I said, I don't like mine's too thick, that's why I'm only doing 2. And then I go and look for the next loop on here, and I put my crochet hook through that. I try to make sure I get both parts of that loop like this, and then I take my strands that are they're folded in half, both of them, and so I have a loop here, and I'm going to grab that loop with my hook, put it through that loop, and now it creates one here, and I'm going to grab those strands with 2 fingers and pull them through and create a knot. Okay, that's it. That's how you create a fringe. And then, you know, just cut them so that they even out with the other ones. And what I do is I take the one that's next to it that is the correct length that I want, and I use that as a guide, and I cut, and that's it. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to keep doing that. So I made mine thin, but you can make yours as thick or as thin as you like. Hope you like that and that it was helpful to you, and I'll show you a picture of the finished scarf at the end. And come back and see me for the next project. And if you want to make the hat that goes with the scarf, there is a link here or in the description. And until the next project, I'll see ya. Have a good time looming, and thanks for watching.